My name's Todd Banks. I'm the president of Kenmore Air. We fly seaplanes here in the Seattle area, and September is a great time to go see the San Juan Islands and Victoria, as soon as the smoke clears out. But I am honored today to introduce you Jay Maloney. Jay is the president of Maloney Aerospace Advisors, and he's going to moderate the fireside chat with Matt, Thriving Through Evolution, MROs, and Aftermarket Services. The discussion is going to explore how changing demand will be driven by growth, geographic shifts, fleet mix trends, asset allocations, and new technology. Jay has spent 17 years at Boeing and was co-founding executive of the Gold Care program and service line. In his role, he set in motion Gold Care Lifecycle Services, a commensurate program that transitioned to Boeing Global Services. His career has taken him around the world engaging with select mission-critical customers, including MROs, airlines, regulators, and engineering organizations. Before joining Boeing, Jay was director of engineering at Alaska Airlines and was responsible for the managing of the fleet's airworthiness and operational performance. Well, help me welcome Jay. Thanks, Jay, for coming.
Thank you, Todd. Well, good morning, everyone. And Todd, thank you for the intro. In the next 45 minutes, we're going to have the opportunity to explore MROs and aftermarket services with Matt Yerbic, CEO of Aviation Technical Services.
Hi, Jay.
Hi. A little bit about Matt. Matt started his career 20 years ago with Alaska Airlines, loading aircraft and cleaning bathrooms. He's a perfect example of we all have to start somewhere in our careers, but he worked his way up at Alaska, eventually acquiring several key executive positions before moving on in 2008 to ATS, where he quickly became the president. And in 2013, Matt led a business acquisition with several partners and became CEO, the position he holds today. Please join me in welcoming Matt Yerbic.
Thank you. I wish it was 20 years ago I started. It was actually 30 years ago. So that.
Okay, 30. We're showing our age. Yeah, we were back at Alaska. Our careers overlapped a little bit there. Yeah. So interesting panel before this one.
That was great.
Yeah, a lot going on in the industry, and I thought if it'd be okay, we'd start out maybe getting your view, your perspective. You're running a successful business with ATS. Maybe get your thoughts on what you see happening in the market, what excites you and what keeps you up at night.
Sounds good. I actually was reflecting on the fact that we're sitting up here together, but it's amazing that anybody would want to sit here to hear about the sexy world of the aftermarket MRO. 10 years ago, this room would have been left with 2 people in here, and I'm sure some of you might want to escape anyway, but we'll try to make this interesting. I think what is changing is the fact that even in the panel before us, you heard a number of the folks talking about aftermarket. Aftermarket really was a place that didn't hold a lot of interest for many decades. You're well aware of this. But you have seen a lot of activity, particularly with large OEMs, a lot of consolidation activity that is driving pretty major shifts in how big companies are thinking about how they can make margin throughout the life cycle of a program, an airplane, a project, whatever it might be. So, the world, I think, is shifting pretty quickly, and a business like ours, and there are a lot of businesses like ours across the U.S. and across the world, but a business like ours has to kind of know and understand what those changes look like.
Yeah, so we're hearing obviously a lot about OEM consolidation, and with your business, is there a impact or a way as you look at those OEMs being consolidated where you got to figure out how to fit into that environment?
We do, and I guess I would say this. Some of you have heard me blather on over the years. I mean, I would say that this ecosystem, which is aerospace for us, is highly connected from beginning to end. And the fact that we are seeing these massive consolidations in the production manufacturing area is really largely connected to the fact that we're also seeing massive consolidation. We'll talk about this in a minute, but massive consolidation in the people who buy these airplanes. You know, for those of you who may have missed it, I doubt there's many in this room, but there really are 4 large players in the U.S. now, and 2 medium-sized ones and 4 or 5 other little ones. Those 4 large players are north of 80% of all the domestic ASMs. If you get on an airplane in the U.S., you're likely to fly on one of 4 carriers. Southwest Airlines, 26% of all the domestic ASMs. So what is, you know, the consolidation, you heard a little bit about it this morning, but consolidation driven largely by the fact that the models that worked 20 or 30 years ago just are broken now. They're going to have to change.
Yeah, I was going to see if we could elaborate a bit on the consolidation of the airlines. It's probably a trend that will continue a bit more, but as they consolidate and you have the big players out there, how has your business been impacted by dealing with the customer, your direct customer, with the larger airlines that come to your door versus the smaller airlines years back that used to come to your door? So how do you adapt to that?
Yeah, I think for a business like ours, particularly in the aftermarket space, we are, and I kind of characterize us as sort of the middle of the market a little bit. We are kind of, you know, probably mid to large size in terms of scale across the U.S. and the world. I think we're the 8th largest supplier of what we do in the world, 3rd in the U.S. But what that has meant is with larger and larger carriers, you know, some of these businesses have 100,000 or more employees, and getting close to 1,000 airplanes in their fleet. The kind of need they have has changed dramatically, and and I'm looking out across the room here, seeing a lot of folks who are, you know, in middle-sized or smaller businesses in some cases. You certainly are feeling the pinch of the fact that these large OEMs, large carriers, are asking for a lot more. And they're asking for a lot more in the deals, which is sometimes can be cash intensive. Like I want to get paid, I want to not pay you for 120 days. We had an employee meeting at ATS a few months ago, and we were talking about sort of one of the questions came up about consolidation and what does it mean, and our ability to respond to it. And I said, you know, just ask yourself the question, would you mind if I didn't pay you for 120 days after you did the work here? And the answer was pretty much no. But for companies like ours to be able to withstand the significant demand, and I think you asked the question specifically about airlines. Airlines are now where they used to have very kind of boutique businesses that would support them. They are now looking out to say, well, I only want one supplier across the world for a certain segment of work, and that supplier needs to be able to respond to an entire ATA chapter of things that happen. You know, for us, this is, again, very sexy stuff like structure, repair, and overhaul, engineered repairs, hard stuff, real work that has to be done by real folks. But they want it to be done in the location they want it, and they want to have enough inventory that they can always respond to needs that exist.
Yeah, I know back in the day when airlines had full engineering staffs, and several of them still do, but the demands that you're experiencing with the larger carriers as far as turnaround times and what they're expecting from you, I might even categorize it as they didn't expect it from themselves back in the day. You know, they would take 2 years to do an interior mod, wouldn't be unheard of necessarily. Yeah. But when they come to your doorstep, I think they're looking for quick turnarounds and are they looking for a full type of engineering support?
In some cases they are. Mostly I would say the middle-sized carriers are looking for that kind of full service, but I think your point's a good one. And by the way, this doesn't happen by accident. It's largely because the folks sitting in this room they have a demand about the newest IFE and the exact right seat. And so what happens today is an airline has to be a lot more nimble in a highly competitive environment. So, Jay and I can remember in the early 90s at Alaska, we might take 3 or 4 years to completely redo the interior of an airplane. That would be death today. There are 500 airplane carriers who are expecting to get an entire fleet transition done in 18 months. And so we have a carrier today who's re-outfitting their entire wide-body fleet. They're putting 5 airplanes at a time into our facility for a year in order to be able to have that done. And that means literally thousands of hours of people hours a day that are going to be applied to that program to make it happen. So in the case of the engineering, I think this is a little bit of building the church for Easter Sunday. When you have these monster programs that come up, the airlines are largely looking for engineering resources that understand their airplanes to be able to respond to them.
Yeah, good point. When you look at your business, you know, when we talk about MROs, but I think it's so much more than that. You know, with the services you have to provide, be it engineering for interior mods, there's the component side of the business, and of course that gets impacted a bit by some of the consolidation we're seeing of OEMs. Would you say, as far as the overall business that you're supporting today has evolved to be more comprehensive than it used to be back in the days where we didn't have these mega carriers and we had the smaller mom and pops?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Our business is, we now have to be kind of a lot of things to a lot of different players, and that we have 4 different business units in our business today, across 4 states now, and a number of different businesses, but all with the aim that when you call with an ask, we have an answer. And it's usually, and we want to make that answer as easy as possible. Our obligation, and one that, going back a little bit to a question you asked a minute ago, Jay, our obligation is now to find ways to make what the airlines used to think were impossible, possible. So we have a customer today who we are working very closely with to reduce the maintenance turn time on their airplanes by 30%. The size of their fleet, actually that will translate into them getting 4 or 5 free airplanes worth of flying. That was absolutely not something that they would have been able to do on their own. They've said it. But our objective is to do it. We have made it 17% of the way to our 30%. So we're going to get there. And we're going to get there through hard work and through innovation and through technology and a lot of investment on our side. And again, I think that goes back to a little bit of the fact that scale is starting to matter more and more. You've heard that now a couple of times today, actually, through
so far this morning.
that it's going to be more and more difficult for smaller companies. Although, again, huge companies have a problem. There's some of them in the room I'm seeing with being nimble enough to respond. But the small companies are also struggling to be able to respond to the needs.
Yeah, well, let's pull on that thread a little bit more. We've talked about consolidation. We've talked about airlines. In general, with the MRO business, I'd like to get your view on where you see, in general, the MROs going. We know we talk about globalization. We talk about, you know, the consolidation, even with the MROs themselves. How do you see that playing out here over the next few years?
So if you were to look at, and you know, one thing I probably should have started with was, hopefully everybody in the room knows what MRO is, but maintenance, repair, and overhaul. This is everything that happens after an airplane has been delivered to a customer.
I took that for granted, but yeah, good point.
So just for clarity, that's what that's the business that we're in. We are the only significant MRO, independent MRO of significance of scale left in the world, actually, which is a little strange sometimes when I look out and see the monsters coming at us.
How does that make you feel?
It's scared, But by that I mean most of the really big ones our competitors now are from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from El Salvador, and one of the largest U.S. public companies. So our competitors have changed dramatically, and so when you look at, and that's not to diminish what a lot of other companies are doing probably in the room here, but the competition is changing, and it is relentless, and it doesn't really care about us, particularly in the world. And I would also say there's been a pretty starting to be a little bit of a resetting of where the work gets done across the world, the kind of work we do. There was a major push to Asia for a while. We're starting to see that relax a little bit as the cost of doing business in Asia has gone up. But now that shift goes to Central and America, and a lot of the competition in those areas comes out of the fact that the governments are sponsoring massive investments in training people there. And I know we're, again, getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but you know, our ability to stay ahead of that competition is going to be largely dependent on our willingness to invest in finding ways to get people into the business. Our business is very hard to automate. It
Right.
is about pulling stuff apart and undoing all of the great work that's happened at Boeing and Electro Impact, and I see I mean, all of these other amazing companies who I look at and say, gosh, you guys do amazing stuff. My job is to break all of it but be able to find all the parts and put it back together in the end. So that takes labor, and it takes well-paid labor, but it still takes labor.
Right, yeah, and that's one of the topics we definitely want to touch upon. When you look at, as an independent MRO, the competition is really fierce for you. If you look at staying competitive, we can talk probably hours about cutting costs and looking at your margins and where the opportunities are within your business, but it does start with the employee. It starts with a strong labor force, a skilled, talented labor force. And as we look at your view, and being that you're a local provider here in the state of Washington, I'd like to get your perspective on what the pipeline, an ideal pipeline, might look like for your business, be it the skill set, the experience you're looking for, and taking into consideration where we need to be going in the next few years.
Yes, Jay, I appreciate it. And I think one of the comments I would make is that and I try to share this message as much as I can, we do have a tendency, and I'm a Monster fan too, but to get excited about the STEM work that's going on here in the state. We should. It's important. But we should also consider the fact that there are technical opportunities for 100 times more people than will ever go, maybe 1,000 times more people that will go into a really good STEM opportunity, and not forget about the fact that we have an opportunity to provide those people out of our state. It's easy to do. We assume that that labor will be available, and talented technical labor will be available. Our technicians generally have 2-year degrees or some form of a 2-year degree, and are certified by the FAA to be able to work on airplane and airplane parts. I've been now involved in this organization for nearly a decade, and we've talked about this every time we get together. We talk about it 4 or 5 other times during the year. This being, how do we find a labor pool and grow a labor pool? And I think the really sad answer for us is we don't know yet. We have a lot of different organizations that are trying to do great work, but from the buyer's perspective, I don't have everything that I need right now. If I would hire another 200 people in Everett today, if they were technically skilled and ready to go. Frankly, we have about 70% of the best supplier of skilled, good people has been the U.S. government to us. We have about 70% of the people who work at our facility today, about 1,500 folks here in Everett, or 1,400 folks here in Everett, have served in the services in one form or another. And that has been a large supplier of folks to us.
Okay. Now, don't want to put you on the spot here, but just a little bit, you mentioned STEM. Yep. Can you tell the folks what?
This obviously this is the science and math,
yeah.
engineering. I think most folks are familiar with a lot of those programs, and we're a huge proponent and huge supporters of it. At ATS, we have about 100 folks in our engineering department just here locally based, mm-hmm. and are looking for more all the time. But when you look at 1,000 that are on the ground, that are actually doing the work, who are paid, significantly more than living wage, that's actually got a much greater economic impact to the state than the STEM investment had in that case. Don't take away that I'm anti-STEM here. This is really about finding ways to make sure that we are looking at both sides of the equation.
Okay, and what I'd like to just pursue just a little bit more. I know we've got it's well known we have a shortage of engineers, we have a shortage of pilots in the workforce. You and I chatted several weeks back, and something that's I've experienced is, and you touched upon it earlier when we talked, beyond the engineers, beyond the pilots, it's having a workforce and a skill set of individuals who are very familiar on how to actually run the business. The panel before us, they're all experts. They know about businesses, they know about buying businesses, but the knowledge and skill set of actually running a maintenance, repair, and overhaul operation, or even in the airline business. I knew coming up through the ranks, there wasn't a lot out there where you really you learn business, you learn the principles of business, but there's some uniqueness about the aerospace business, and certainly the business that you're running. Do you have any concerns in that area as far as that pipeline goes?
I'm sure I'm looking out across the room at a lot of business leaders. You probably have way too many folks helping you be great in your business. That's a joke. I think all of us are struggling. We struggle with being able to grow and find folks who understand this industry deeply. And it is a unique, by the way, this is no different than Amazon looking for technical engineers, I guess, to some degree. Although we have a 45-year business based here in Washington. And, we find that we largely have to grow our own folks. We don't have the opportunity to go out in the world and pick too many people up. Occasionally we do, but mostly it's about spending 10 years training people, and I think there are some ways that we could look at getting people and some head starts for folks, which I think is also important, particularly if they have an interest in leadership.
Yeah, good insight. Now I know we're probably got a few minutes here. It's good insight on a lot of this aftermarket services and MRO business. I'm going to see if, with the few minutes we've got left, if there's any questions anybody might have for Matt.
By the way, I can't guarantee a good answer. As if my mother were in the audience, she would ask if I was qualified to answer any of these things. So,
Rosemary's got one. Yeah. Let me make sure I heard you right. How much is the drug testing? Mandatory drug testing is the question.
Yeah, it's I never would I have thought that it would have been a factor. Although I did grow up in Palmer, Alaska, where it was always a factor. But it's I would just say generally the screening is a pretty big challenge. And for those of you who don't, we're largely associated with being on an airport. We have a lot of responsibilities to the FAA, local airport requirements, and it's hard. It's also expensive. We have to maintain a very, very robust drug testing program. Every one of our employees is subject to that. And it also gets confusing in today's world. We have had a lot of employees, not a lot, we've had a few employees where we've had a challenge, and the answer is, but it's legal. And so, our answer is, but it's not legal for you. And so there's a lot of confusion in the world about where does this all go and what should be tested and what doesn't. So it's certainly, my view is very simply, I don't want a pilot who's on drugs, and I don't want a person working on the airplane who's on drugs either. So it's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy call for us, but it does get confusing to some folks for sure. It does, for sure.
Okay, yeah, the question was, it keeps people out of the industry? Well, when it's...
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's meant to.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, that's the objective, unfortunately.
So,
yeah. Yep.
yeah. Okay. Any other questions? We got to get at least one more. We got one more in the back there.
Ouch.
That's
I
a
think
good
everybody heard
question,
it. It's a
isn't
great
it?
question. So I guess I would start, and we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but you know, it's not just Boeing. It's also, you know, obviously some very recent news around some potential consolidations. There is a path to needing to be big for 10 companies in the U.S. on this, and they're going to do it. It's happening. You just need to drive around Payne Field or the Everett area and see the signs changing constantly on doors. It's happening. You heard about it earlier. I think for us, obviously in this neighborhood, it's a little surprising, but we actually we buy as much from Boeing as we sell to Boeing. So we are in a little bit of a different position than many of the typical Boeing suppliers. But we shouldn't kid ourselves. Boeing's an incredibly important customer and will drive a different behavior. And I think my answer would be, I don't know. I think it's going to end up driving like it has, and I will use the engine. Anybody from GE in here? I'll use the engine world as an example. What has really happened is businesses like ours have to step on one side of the line or the other. You're either with us or you're against us. And you know, from our perspective, and for anybody in the audience from Boeing, Bill, we're with you. We love you. No. Buy more. But I think what is going to happen is we're going to see companies have to make some real decisions about whether or not they're going to be interested in supporting Boeing in the effort to grow a $50 billion aftermarket business, or whether they're going to see if there's a market to compete against them. And the competition part's going to be difficult, but in every other market like that, engines being one of them, there are some really, really successful companies that have been able to tuck underneath. Frankly, because of our customer base, we are partnered with Boeing in this growth and do provide a lot of what I would call secondary services to Boeing each and every day. So we think that there's a real opportunity to grow, and probably I would be on the, it's the 75% great opportunity, and it'll be 25% the fact that Boeing in part will be doing this in order to be able to see their own margins grow and other people's get smaller, and I understand that.
Yeah, it was a good question. That'll play out over the next few years, I'm sure. Okay, any other questions we can give Matt here? The last one was a good one. Can we see if we can top that one? No? Okay. Well, then I want to thank Matt for his time and his expertise and his insight on the aftermarket business. And we'll conclude this session then.
Thank you guys very much.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Matt.